This is my country, your country, our country. All Indians have a right to be proud of our country. Are you ready to feel a hit of pride? This is India at 75.
A person without the knowledge of his past, origin, and culture is equal to a tree without its roots. Hello everyone, I am Lakshmi Chaitanya from Kendriya Vidyalaya Gachibowli, Hyderabad. Cultural heritage includes artworks, sculptures, monuments, structures, and other significant objects in the society. It also entails intangible elements such as folklores, languages, customs, beliefs, and traditions. The first misconception we all have is that culture is only related to religion. Culture is related to religion, but it's not completely about it. We have been preserving our diverse culture for centuries. UNESCO has helped us preserve some of the most prestigious and mysterious monuments and places in India as World Heritage Sites. It is notable here that one of the fundamental duties listed in the Indian Constitution too states to value and preserve our age-old culture and heritage. On behalf of this, our government has been taking several important decisions. For example, the government introduced the system of local governance called the Panchayati Raj in the year 1992, which was taken from the governing rules of the Gupta dynasty, which ruled India between 4th and 6th centuries. Culture plays an important role in the development agenda of any nation. And in connection with this, India has a separate ministry for culture which works for the safeguarding of our heritage. Epics like Ramayana, Mahabharata, and many others too tell us about our diverse culture and also help in depicting the one united culture India has. Languages which are spoken by very less people in India are also given importance and are recognized by the government. Tribal communities too have their own diverse traditions and cultures, and government has taken many initiatives to preserve them. Indigenous tribes were given shelter in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and also University of Hyderabad tried to provide a script to the Gonds tribe. In these 75 years, we have been preserving our cultural heritage, but it's again our duty to preserve them for the next coming generations. So what can we as citizens do to preserve them for the future? Firstly, speaking about the monuments like temples, churches, mosques, and tombs, we must ensure that the environment around them is pollution free so that they would have a long life. And then we must keep in our mind some facts while visiting these places. Each and every painting or sculpture it has a story to tell. So we must not scratch or write unnecessary things on the walls. And we must maintain cleanliness. We all know that children are the future of any country. And so we must start teaching the importance of cultural heritage from the school level itself. And being a student of a government school, I've been part of such activities. For example, Ek Bharat Shresht Bharat is a wonderful initiative taken by the government where we get to meet students from another school which belongs to another state. And then we discuss about the culture of each state and we discuss about the traditions they follow there. And then we get awareness about the different diverse culture India has. Mera Gaon Meri Dharohar is an amazing project where youth are encouraged to know about their native place or the hometown, like the place where they belong to. Tours, excursions, and trips to World Heritage Sites can create tons of curiosity in children so that they get to know the past of our country. We understand the culture that India has and the roots of India. And then children should be encouraged to learn indigenous sports which were developed in India and indigenous languages so that they understand the diversity of our country and then how we all are united. Culture is the only thing which can make us all feel that we all are united and we all are one. Heritage can bridge the differences between the people and can make us stay united. It is critical to preserve our culture, heritage, and history for obvious purposes. And now, we need to raise our heads up and stand up for our nation and celebrate the 75th glorious year of our independence. And then, let's all be proud of our nation. Jai Hind.
I'm Kashish Goenka of the Heritage School, and I would like to present my views on how we have preserved handlooms and ancient textiles in India. Handloom is a fabric woven on a loom, operated by the weaver with his own bare hands. You may think that hand weaving may lead to flaws, such as uneven yarn, a tear, a knot, an unfinished motif. Yet handloom is a flawless form of art which tells a unique story of persistence, enrapturing skill, and effort. India is a country that still creates textiles from the genius of its master weavers. As per official figures from the Handloom Export Promotion Council, contribution of the handloom sector in India is quite noteworthy. This is because it is both an indigenous fashion as well as a showstopper for big fashion labels. Handloom is a legacy, but the sad truth is, many weavers still struggle to make their ends meet. When the Industrial Revolution occurred and British rule impoverished our country, weavers were forced to compete with factories. They had to work faster and for cheaper. Many lost hope and joined these factories. Handloom lost the position it held in the Indian textile industry. After independence, the revival of the handloom sector began with Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, an Indian social reformer who championed handicrafts for social and economic upliftment. She helped establish the All India Handicrafts Board and Central Cottage Industries Emporia. Today, Indian artisans have stood the test of time and have preserved this timeless craft despite the various hardships that had come their way. Gandhiji had mentioned in one of his letters, handloom weaving is dying. Everyone admits that whatever may be the future of the mill industry, the handlooms ought not to be allowed to perish. In small cities like Varanasi, one can find these gorgeous handlooms or textile arts at any street one walks on, and that too at a reasonable price. The handloom sector currently contributes to 0.7% of India's GDP. But in the next 75 years, India should expand the handloom and textile industry. There are many ways this can be done. With government support, weavers should be helped to pivot their sales and marketing campaigns around sustainability. The Union Textile Ministry is implementing policies to help weavers with obtaining credit and accessing raw materials, but this needs to be scaled up. Social media campaigns such as hashtag handmade Dilse serve to bring awareness about handlooms to the young generation. New startups should be inventicized to move away from fast fashion, which is bad for the environment, and focus on empowering the handlooms industry. Through its handlooms, India should aspire to become one of the fashion capitals of the world. This will also help in increasing tourism and promoting the economy. India has a bright future in the hands of its able weavers, just waiting to be harnessed.
A wise man once said, "A river does not just carry water, it carries life." Warm greetings to one and all. I am Khushi Jain of Class 8 from Sushila Birla Girls School, Kolkata. India is endowed with a rich and vast diversity of natural resources, water being one of them. Over the past 30 years, numerous attempts have been made to clean the rivers like Yamuna and Ganga. The Yamuna Action Plan project Phase 2 began in 2003. It addresses the abatement of severe pollution of the river caused by rapid population growth, industrialization and urbanization in the towns of the river basin. Building new sewage treatment plants, expanding the capacity of old ones, and rehabilitating the sewers will be done to enhance the capacity of the treatment. Despite all these efforts, it will be quite some time before we see it again in its former glory. The Ganga, as we all know, is the symbol of India's memorable past, which has been flowing into the present and continues to flow towards the ocean of the future. Sad but true, today the Ganges is considered to be the fifth most polluted river in the world. Under National Mission for Clean Ganga, Namami Gange program, meaning obeisance to the Ganges River, was launched by our Union Finance Minister Arun Jaitley on 10th July 2014. A budget of 20,000 crore was sanctioned with the objective of decreasing pollution through bioremediation and use of innovative technologies. Unlike previous projects for cleaning Ganga, Namami Gange is the most comprehensive river conservation program. The earth is a mother and the rivers are her veins. The future of India is in many ways tied to the health of our rivers. India wants to clean its rivers by 2030, but it looks like a distant dream to me. India needs a more holistic approach to water management. The daily large-scale discharge of liquid and solid wastes into the Ganga remains unchecked. Every day, nearly 3 billion liters of sewage is dumped into the Ganga, but existing sewage treatment capacity along the river can only treat 2.25 billion liters per day. The river cannot become cleaner until the sewage falling into the river stops completely. Trains from factories do pollute Ganga, but it's the government-run sewage systems that are the biggest contributors to the filth flowing into the river. On many occasions, the government makes the pretense of closing such trains, but the reality is different. Closing them permanently requires strong political will. For this, the entire sewage system needs to be dismantled and replanned. If India as a nation is serious about tackling river pollution, this shouldn't take decades to fix. With technologies at hand, what is needed is intent and the commitment to execute. We as the citizens of India have the social responsibility of keeping our rivers clean. I end my speech leaving you with this note. Time to care before the streams are bare. Together we can and we will. Thank you.
Trash. We see it all around us and have more often than not even contributed to the pile, while perhaps thinking that just one more piece won't make any difference to the mountains of trash that already surround us. I am Shrugal Bhattacharjee of Birla High School, Kolkata, and I am here to speak on the mountains of trash that surround us and how we can solve our impending garbage overload. Urban India is the world's third largest garbage producer, and by 2050, waste is expected to go up to 436 million tons. Despite increased interest in recycling and reusing, there is still a serious lack of infrastructure, support, and awareness. Untreated waste contaminates land and makes its way into rivers, lakes, oceans, and wetlands. Delhi's garbage dump is now taller than the Taj Mahal. Indian cities, in their drive for fast economic development, have so far failed to effectively manage the huge quantity of waste produced. Mountains of trash have become a common sight in many Indian cities, and so has the stench and noxious gases that emanate from them. But how did the situation become so bad? The answer lies in the liberalization reforms of the 1990s, which failed to anticipate the wave of urbanization that was to follow. As India greeted the 21st century, this middle class was swept into a vortex of spending, and the immense waste generated was a byproduct of that. The proven rule for waste management is to extract maximum practical benefits from the products and generate the minimum amount of waste possible. Germany, a leader in solid waste management, employs over 250,000 people and has an annual revenue of around $80 million. But for India to replicate this, we need a strong executive will coupled with an integrated process which will help the government and other partners move the waste management system in the right direction. The government of India calls the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan the most comprehensive cleanliness campaign ever launched to build the vision of a clean and green India. However, the results on the ground so far are not very encouraging. What we need right now is strong, credible action on the ground, sector by sector, with a measuring index which the peers of the industry can follow. Municipal bodies must also be penalized if they fail to achieve their desired neutralization targets by the end of the time period. Audit bodies must also be engaged in order to streamline the process and help flag deficiencies. We must also contribute our bit in this cleansing process in order to build a clean and green India. Thank you.
India and social media. Did we already begin long back, or are we just getting started with the social media? Nowadays, social media is a commercial jargon. Without social media, it is hard to efficacy of any corporation promotional strategy ranging from simple ways of transmitting information. It is progress to create of multiple purpose medium of communication. Consumers and companions are more connected than even before because of the rise of social media. The human desire to connect as well as development in digitalization has spurred the rise of social media. It's a narrative about making and maintaining deep relationships on a large scale. To highlight connection development, social media platforms are also referred to social networking sites. Social networking sites continue to expand quickly in India, with some of leading worldwide business gaining more of prominent position. 6 Degrees Come was the first social networking site to go live in 1997. Orkut was the most popular social networking platform in India, boasting a 64% user participation. People continue to explain that Orkut was far by the most popular social networking in India, having 4 million visits. Facebook is the second most common Indian social media platform, increasing 150% each year. MySpace, Instagram, LinkedIn are few more most popular social networking platforms in India. India is presently the world's 7th largest social networking marketplace, trailing only the United States, Germany, China, Brazil, and the Russian Federation. The impact of social media has resulted in a new method of conversation where interaction are rapid, contact is quickly conveyed. As a result, it can be shown that in the existence of social media was discovered in India a long time ago. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Anya Verma from 9th A studying in BRS Global School. As we know, India will celebrate its 75th Independence Day on August 15, 2022 with the usual pride to mark its freedom from British rule. The Indian independence movement began during World War I and was led by Mahatma Gandhi on August 15, 1947. India got its freedom ending an almost 200-year British rule. Since 1947, India has achieved tremendous progress in raising growth, income levels, and standards of living. In these 75 years, India's growth story has been impressive. From agricultural production to nuclear and space technology, from giant steel plant to becoming an IT power and having third largest startup ecosystem. So now let's talk about my topic today, saving India's green cover. Are we doing enough to keep our cities green? First of all, we have to know about green cover. Green cover is defined as natural or planted vegetation covering a certain area of terrain, functioning as protection against soil erosion, protecting the fauna and balancing the temperature. Green cover is also referred to a broad range of strategies to integrate green, permeable and reflecting surfaces into cities and towns which are home to 89% of our population. For the first time possibly since independence, the forest cover in India has recorded an increase. The green cover has gone up from 19.47% to 19.49% with an annual incremental growth of 28,000 hectares. But over the years, we have lost many trees to development. The environmental consequences of the reduction in green cover have been wide-ranging, increasing in air pollution, groundwater depletion, frequently flooding during the monsoon, and an overall rise in the temperature in the city as a result of concretization. The highest green cover increases have been registered in West Bengal and Odisha, followed by Bihar, Jharkhand, Tamil Nadu. Most of the northeastern states and states like Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and Karnataka have shown considerable decrease in forest cover. India's total forest and tree cover now stands at 80.73 million hectares, roughly 24.5% of its geographical area, and still far from the eventual target of 33%, which India has committed to raise by 2030. The effort to increase tree cover up to 33% sits within the National Mission for a Green India, one of 8 missions under the National Action Plan on Climate Change, as well as earlier National Forest Policy goals. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a massive economic and social fallout for India as it has across the globe. In India, a large number of people lost their job and supply chains across industries and agriculture have been disrupted. At the same time, environmental indicators, notably air and freshwater quality, showed improvement following the long period of nationwide lockdown. This brief outlines why India must make a focused decision to move towards a path of economic recovery that is both environmentally sustainable and inclusive. The greenery of any country is an important part for the national development of that country. Where there is greenery, health and prosperity move. And as Albert Einstein once said, look deep in the nature and then you will understand everything better. Thank you.
For the economic growth, development and welfare of nations, power acts as a crucial component. In India, the power sector is very diversified. From conventional sources such as coal, natural gas, and crude oil to renewable sources such as hydro, wind, and nuclear power. The demand of electricity has been rapidly increasing and is expected to grow even further in the years to come. About 80% of India's electricity generation is from fossil fuels, coal and oil being the topmost ones. Since the past 75 years, India has been largely dependent on fossil fuel imports to meet its energy demands. In fact, India is the third largest energy consumer in the world, following China and the United Nations. The burning of fossil fuels has been leading us to land degradation, water pollution, hazardous emissions, global warming crisis, ocean acidification, among others. The true costs of coal, natural gas, and other fossil fuels may not be as obvious, but their impacts can be disastrous. Having said that, we are not locked into a fossil fuel future, however. We have made progress in scaling renewable energy and energy efficiency in India. But the transition to cleaner and alternate energy sources has to be engineered faster by policymakers and stakeholders. The human cost of both air pollution and climate change is primarily due to fossil fuel consumption. If the emissions of fossil fuels from anthropogenic sources in India can be potentially controlled, the average life expectancy of the population will increase by more than 1 year. Over the next few decades, India will have to significantly change and adapt to renewable energy sources to ace climate action and achieve the net zero pathways in the next 3 to 4 decades. In India, the industry is now being subjected to cleaner energy sources. There are crores of people who will have to undergo this transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources. And this will require proper planning and participation of people. We have to ask ourselves, are we moving India or are we choking India? Thank you.
Hello everyone. Today I am going to speak on how technology has changed over the past years. We've all studied in our childhood how scientists have invented bulbs, tube lights and many more things to fulfill our daily needs and to fulfill our daily needs itself and not to go excessive with its use. That now that we compare the technological usage in the past and now, there is a very vivid, very clear difference, and it's a vast and a very huge difference that we can notice. In the past, we used to use technology for very minimal things and to fulfill our daily needs but not wants. There is a very clear difference between needs and wants, right? Now everybody wants technology and not needs technology. We do need, but we also use it for our wants, which is actually not necessary for us. For example, touchscreen phones and many more things like laptops. Laptops are necessary for sometimes, but not every time, right? So we need to see what we need and how much of technology we need to include in our daily life and to limit the usage of technology. You need reasons for that? Let me tell you. More technology, more electronic gadgets. And one more thing I wanted to say is that technology is not bad. More technology isn't bad. The wrong use of technology is bad. So more electronic gadgets, more current, the more coal usage, and the more coal usage, the more harm to the environment. And we do not want to cause any harm to the environment just because we have a bunch of wants right there, right? So another very sustainable alternative that we have is to use solar panels. Yes, solar panels is very efficient use, and we can use it in a very efficient way, and it's a very sustainable use actually. Because now that we're using coal, the alternative method is to take the solar energy from the sun and to convert it into electrical energy, which this whole process takes place in a solar panel. So this can be expensive, but I feel like this is a very good investment to make in to protect our environment at least, right? So, at least by listening to this, I hope you all can change to solar panels. At least not many, because I know it's expensive. At least start by few, and then you can see a change in our environment as well. These little steps make a huge difference. And also, technology is not bad, but excessive and wrong use of technology is very bad. So, please keep it limited. Thank you.